Vatican Radio Technical Log. Entry hashtag 4847. Date, March 15th, 2025. Time, 3:47 GMT. Operator, Nyrick Ford, Senior Communications Specialist. The third time His Holiness requested the emergency broadcast system at 3 a.m., I knew something had shifted beyond normal papal protocol. My grandmother always said that when holy men start whispering numbers in the dark, the world prepares to bleed. I've been running Vatican Radio's emergency communications for 6 years now, ever since I transferred from the Syrian refugee resettlement program. The Holy Father's late-night broadcasts weren't unusual. Pastoral messages, prayer vigils, sometimes urgent calls for peace during international crises. But tonight felt different. The electromagnetic readings on my console showed interference patterns I'd never seen, like the building itself was humming with some frequency just below human hearing. Brother Nyrick, the Pope's voice crackled through the intercom system, using the informal address he'd adopted since learning about my family's flight from Aleppo. Please prepare the Alpha 7 emergency transmission array. Alpha 7 was our most powerful system, capable of overriding every emergency broadcast network globally. We'd used it exactly twice in my tenure, once during the earthquake in Turkey, once when the cardinals were selecting the new pope. The power requirements alone needed Vatican City's entire electrical grid. I keyed the microphone. Your Holiness, Alpha 7 requires authorization from the Swiss Guard captain and the Secretary of State. Also, the system needs 4 hours of warm-up time to prevent. The authorization has been granted, he interrupted, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. And Brother Nyrick, time is not a luxury we possess. Through the reinforced glass of my booth, I could see the papal chamber's windows glowing with an odd greenish light. The Pope had been in private prayer for 18 hours straight, according to the guard rotation logs. No meals, no audiences, no acknowledgement of the cardinals waiting in the apostolic palace. I began the Alpha 7 activation sequence, my fingers moving through the familiar patterns of switches and dials. The system hummed to life, drawing power from the Vatican's grid with an almost hungry intensity. The lights in my booth dimmed, and somewhere in the building's depths, I heard the massive generators shifting to full output. Technical readiness in 3 hours and 47 minutes, Your Holiness, I reported. Excellent. Brother Nyrick, I want you to monitor frequency 147.3 MHz during the preparation period. Record everything. I paused, stylus hovering over my logbook. Your Holiness, that frequency is reserved for submarine emergency communications. The Italian Navy uses it for their nuclear deterrent fleet. I am aware of its purpose. The line went dead. I stared at the radio array, watching the Alpha 7 system's massive vacuum tubes beginning their slow warm-up glow. In the distance, I could hear the Angelus bells of St. Peter's, but they sounded wrong, like they were ringing in a different key, or maybe the interference was affecting my hearing. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Amira in Detroit. Nyrick, I had the strangest dream about you. You were standing in a room full of broken radios, and the static was speaking Arabic. Are you okay? I typed back quickly. Just working late. Vatican Radio never sleeps. Give my love to the kids. But as I hit send, I noticed something that made my blood turn cold. The timestamp on her message showed tomorrow's date, March 16th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time would make it 5:47 a.m. here in Rome, over 2 hours in the future. I checked my phone's settings, then the Vatican's atomic clock system. Both showed the correct time, 3:52 a.m., March 15th. The Alpha 7 system gave a low, harmonic pulse, like a church organ hitting its deepest note. On my monitoring equipment, frequency 147.3 MHz suddenly came alive with a signal I'd never heard before, a rhythmic pattern that sounded almost like Latin, but spoken in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere far deeper than any human throat. I started recording, as instructed, but my hands were shaking. The green light from the papal chambers had grown brighter, and now I could see it reflecting off the windows of the Sistine Chapel. In the distance, the bells of St. Peter's continued their discordant chiming, and I realized they were keeping time with the submarine frequency signal. Whatever the Pope was planning to broadcast to the world in less than 4 hours, it had already begun. I opened a new log entry and began typing. Anomalous electromagnetic activity detected in papal quarters. Unexplained signal interference on military frequencies. Requesting technical supervisor review of all systems before emergency broadcast authorization. But as I wrote the words, I knew no supervisor would be coming. The corridors of Vatican Radio were empty except for me, and outside my booth, the ancient stones of the Apostolic Palace seemed to be singing along with that impossible frequency, welcoming something that had been waiting a very long time to speak. The Alpha 7 system pulsed again, stronger this time, and somewhere in the darkness of the papal chambers, I heard the sound of the Holy Father's voice beginning what sounded like a prayer. But the words he was speaking weren't in Latin or Italian or any language I recognized. They were numbers, nuclear launch codes, and they were being broadcast on the frequency that could reach every submarine in the world. Technical log 3:59 GMT. Recording equipment shows impossible signal propagation. Frequency 147.3, showing global reception despite Vatican Radio's limited maritime transmission capability. Recommend immediate consultation with. Entry terminated mid-sentence. Vatican Secret Archives, Sublevel 3. Day 2 to 1432 Vatican Time. Archivist Emergency Log, Dr. Elvira Chase. The parchment shouldn't exist. I've been telling myself that for 6 hours now, ever since Cardinal Toretti's urgent request sent me down to the Hereticus collection. Find anything about nuclear prophecy, he said, hands shaking as he blessed himself. The Holy Father's been asking about manuscripts from the Avignon period. But this isn't from Avignon. The vellum dates to 1347, according to my initial assessment, but the text is impossible. In the year of our Lord 2025, when the earth completes its 778th cycle since the great mortality, the shepherd of Rome shall speak the final prayer. 7 words in the tongue of Abraham's fire, and the sky shall answer with cleansing flame. I've triple-checked the carbon dating. The ink analysis confirms 14th century. But the manuscript describes nuclear weapons with precision that shouldn't exist outside of Los Alamos, 1945. The air down here tastes different today. Metallic, like the moment before lightning strikes. My hands won't stop shaking as I transcribe the next passage. The count of days, when the faithful number 1,400,000,000 souls, when the sea of Peter broadcasts to all nations, when the weapons of Prometheus sleep in silos of 7 nations, then shall the ancient compact be fulfilled. I've been researching papal demographics all afternoon. Current global Catholic population, 1.389 billion. Close enough to be terrifying. The manuscript continues with what appears to be technical specifications disguised as mystical poetry. 7 keys to unlock the furnace of heaven. The prayer transmitted on frequencies of the angels. Words that shall reach the servants of fire beneath the earth and sea. Submarine communication frequencies. Nuclear launch protocols. Encoded in medieval Latin. Something's moving in the archives. Not footsteps. I know the sound of every section down here. This is different. Like pages turning in rooms that should be empty. I've photographed everything, uploaded copies to 3 different cloud servers. If something happens to the original, if someone decides this knowledge is too dangerous. Wait. There's more text appearing on the parchment. That's impossible. But I'm watching new words form in the same medieval script, the same faded ink. She who reads these words in the final days, keeper of forbidden knowledge, guard well the truth. The shepherd's voice is not his own. The prayer he speaks shall echo in the skulls of kings, and they shall answer with thunder. My phone's buzzing. Text from Nyrick in the radio department. Can you come up? Something's wrong with the broadcast equipment. It's receiving signals it shouldn't be able to receive. The manuscript is warm to the touch now. Actually warm. I need to get this to Cardinal Toretti immediately. But first, I'm sealing the original in the climate-controlled vault. Whatever's happening to this parchment, I don't want it exposed to. Oh God. The other manuscripts. The entire Hereticus collection. Every document in this section is glowing with the same faint phosphorescence. Every forbidden text, every suppressed prophecy, every heretical revelation the Church has hidden for centuries, all of them activating simultaneously. My dosimeter is clicking. That's impossible. There's no radioactive material in the archives. But the counter is climbing steadily. I'm sealing this log and uploading immediately. If you're reading this, and the date stamp shows anything after June 22nd, 2025, then we failed to stop what's coming. The ancient compact, whatever it is already in motion. And I think I'm the only one who knows what the Pope is really going to pray for. End log, upload successful, 1547 Vatican time. From e.chase@vaticanarchives.va to n.ford@vaticanradio.va. Subject, urgent, historical verification needed. Sent, 1548 Vatican time. Nyrick, coming up to radio now. Bring your frequency analysis equipment to the archives instead. I need you to scan something down here. And Nyrick, whatever you do, don't let anyone else know what we're about to discover. The manuscripts are trying to tell us something, and I don't think we're going to like the answer. P.S. How many nuclear submarines does NATO have in the Mediterranean right now? Personal note, written by hand. Found in Dr. Chase's office, June 23, 2025. If I disappear, look for the Hereticus Collection, Sublevel 3, Vault H47. The parchment with the glowing text. Don't touch it with bare hands. The countdown isn't metaphorical. Someone's been planning this for 700 years. EC. Vatican Radio Technical Log, number 127. Date, March 15, 2025. Time, 1442 Greenwich Mean Time. Operator, N. Ford. Classification, urgent, technical anomaly. The Holy Father's private broadcasting chamber has been locked for 6 hours. This shouldn't concern me. Papal privacy is sacred, but the electromagnetic readings coming from that room are impossible. I've been monitoring Vatican radio systems for 3 years. My father always said technical work was prayer through precision, and I've held to that. Every frequency calibrated, every transmission clean. But what's happening in the papal chambers defies every principle of broadcast engineering I know. The interference started during morning prayers. Not the usual static you'd expect from old wiring and ancient walls. This was structured, mathematical. At first, I thought it was feedback from the new digital mixing board, but when I traced the signal, it originated from the Pope's private studio, a room that's been silent for 2 days. Swiss Guard protocols prevent me from entering without authorization, but I can monitor the output. What I'm seeing makes no sense. The frequency signature matches submarine communication bands, specifically the emergency channels used by nuclear fleet commanders. Why would the Holy Father's private prayers require military-grade transmission power? I've pulled the technical specifications for our broadcasting array. Standard Vatican radio reaches maybe 200 miles on a clear day. The power signature I'm recording could punch through the ionosphere and reach satellites. More troubling, the signal pattern resembles the NATO emergency authentication protocols my cousin Rashid showed me during his stint with the Lebanese military. The sacred has always carried mystery, but this feels different. Wrong. 3 hours ago, Elvira Chase from the secret archives burst into my control room, manuscripts clutched against her chest like armor. Her usual composed demeanor had cracked. "Nyrick, I need to see your transmission logs from the past month," she said, spreading medieval parchments across my equipment desk. The documents were covered in symbols I couldn't read, but the numbers were clear enough. Dates, coordinates, and what looked like countdown sequences. When I compared them to our recent broadcast schedules, the correlation was exact. Every papal address, every benediction, every supposedly spontaneous prayer had been timed to these ancient markings. "These manuscripts date to 1347, Elvira whispered, pointing to illuminated letters that seemed to shift in the control room's blue glow. They reference a divine frequency that would herald the final judgment. The mathematical sequences match your transmission data perfectly. I wanted to dismiss it as coincidence. Religious scholars finding patterns in random data, seeing providence in statistics. But then she showed me the final page, a detailed technical diagram that shouldn't exist in a 14th century text. It depicted broadcasting equipment with specifications that matched our current array down to the antenna configuration. How is this possible? I asked, but Elvira had already gathered her manuscripts and left, muttering prayers in Latin. The readings have intensified since then. My equipment registers power draws that should trip every circuit breaker in Vatican City, yet the lights remain steady. The signal strength climbs beyond anything our transmitters should produce, and the frequency keeps shifting to match those submarine bands. I've tried reaching the papal chambers through internal communications. No response. The Swiss guard stationed outside reports everything is normal, but when I asked about the electromagnetic readings, he looked confused. "What readings?" he said. "The Holy Father has been in private prayer for days. Very quiet, but my instruments don't lie. Something in that room is broadcasting with enough power to reach every nuclear submarine in the Mediterranean." The pattern has become clear over the past hour. Every 15 minutes, a concentrated burst transmits on rotating military frequencies. The signal contains what appears to be authentication codes, the kind used to verify orders from Supreme Command Authority. I've heard these sequences before, during joint NATO exercises when I worked civilian radio support in Damascus. These aren't prayers, they're activation commands. My hands shake as I document this. The electromagnetic signature suggests the broadcasts are reaching orbital relay satellites, bouncing signals to receivers worldwide. If someone with nuclear authority interprets these as legitimate papal communications, as divine authorization for something terrible, the consequences would be beyond imagination. The worst part, the power source. Our generators can't produce this output. The signal strength requires energy input that would drain Vatican City's entire electrical grid. Yet every other system operates normally. The coffee maker in my break room works fine. The elevator runs smoothly. Only my monitoring equipment registers this impossible power draw. Either my instruments are experiencing coordinated failure across multiple independent systems, or something in the papal chambers is accessing an energy source that doesn't appear on any Vatican utility grid. The frequency just shifted again, this time to match the emergency band used by the USS Michigan, currently patrolling the North Atlantic. I know this because the signal briefly synchronized with a maintenance transmission from the submarine's communications officer. For 30 seconds, Vatican radio and a nuclear submarine shared the same frequency, same encryption protocol, same authentication header. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. I need to reach someone with authority to investigate, but who? The Cardinal Secretary of State? The Swiss Guard commander? How do I explain that the Holy Father's private prayers are transmitting nuclear submarine codes without sounding insane? The signal strength is climbing again. Whatever device is generating this output is preparing for a major transmission. The power signature suggests a broadcast that could reach every military communications satellite in orbit simultaneously. I've made a decision. Against all protocol, I'm going to attempt contact with the papal chambers directly. Not through official channels. They'll stop me before I can explain. I'm going to interrupt the transmission, break into the emergency frequency, and speak to whoever is in that room. If it's truly the Holy Father, he'll understand my concern for the technical integrity of Vatican radio. If it's something else, God help us all. Signal analysis summary. Transmission power, 847% above equipment specifications. Frequency matches, NATO submarine emergency channels. Authentication patterns, military command authorization protocols. Energy source, unknown/undetectable. Pattern timing, matches medieval countdown sequences from secret archives. Personal note, if this log is found and I am not available to explain its contents, contact Elvira Chase in the secret archives immediately. She has documentation that may explain these anomalies. The papal chambers must be investigated by someone with both technical expertise and ecclesiastical authority. Something is using Vatican radio to send military commands worldwide. I pray I'm wrong about the implications. End log number 127. Vatican radio technical log, day 4. Operator, Nyrick Ford. Time, 1447 Greenwich Mean Time. Alert status, critical escalation. The boards are lighting up like Christmas morning. Every emergency frequency we monitor, FEMA, NATO, Russian Federation Emergency Ministry, Chinese National Emergency Broadcasting, all receiving the same signal. Our signal. The Pope's prayer, transmitted on wavelengths that shouldn't even be possible from our equipment. I've been manning Vatican radio for 8 years. I know our transmission capabilities down to the what. We broadcast to pilgrims and parishes, not to nuclear command centers buried under mountains in Colorado and the Urals. But here we are, 1503 Greenwich Mean Time, just intercepted communication from NORAD. They're asking for clarification of papal authorization codes embedded in emergency frequency 7.335 MHz. Authorization codes? The Holy Father was reciting the Litany of Saints 3 hours ago. I was there. I recorded it myself. Except now, playing back that recording, it's different. The Latin words are the same, but underneath, frequencies my equipment shouldn't be able to detect without specialized analysis software. There's something else. Digital packets, encrypted data streams, alphanumeric sequences that make my teeth ache when I try to focus on them. I called down to archives to get Elvira. She needs to hear this. The phone just rings and rings. Security says she hasn't left the restricted section in 12 hours. 15:17 Greenwich Mean Time, Sweet Mother of God. The BBC World Service just went off script. Mid-sentence during their afternoon news update, the presenter's voice changed. Same person, same vocal patterns, but suddenly speaking in perfect ecclesiastical Latin. Benedictio nuclearis super turam veniet. Ignis purificatorius descendit ex caelo. Nuclear blessing upon the earth shall come. Purifying fire shall descend from heaven. Then, back to normal programming. Weather reports for London, as if nothing happened. 15:28 Greenwich Mean Time. Emergency services across Rome are reporting the same phenomenon. Ambulance dispatchers suddenly broadcasting prayers. Police radio operators reciting verses from Revelation in languages they don't speak. Fire department frequencies carrying what sounds like medieval chants. All synchronized, all perfectly timed, all originating from Vatican Radio's transmission array. I'm looking at our broadcasting console right now. The equipment is cold. We're not transmitting anything. The Holy Father finished his address hours ago and retired to his chambers. But every monitoring station in our network shows our signal strength at impossible levels, reaching frequencies we don't have licenses for, accessing satellites we don't have clearance to use. 15:34 Greenwich Mean Time. Just received priority flash from the Swiss Guard communications desk. Captain Stone sounds different, strained. He's requesting immediate technical assessment of all papal communication systems for potential electronic warfare applications. Electronic warfare? These are broadcasting systems for Sunday Mass and papal audiences. Our most sophisticated equipment couldn't jam a local radio station, let alone penetrate military communications. But I keep thinking about what I saw in the Holy Father's chambers yesterday. Those markings on his private calendar. Countdown numbers written in what looked like his handwriting, but older somehow, as if the ink had been aging for years instead of days. 15:41 Greenwich Mean Time. Moscow radio just broadcast the Lord's Prayer in Church Slavonic, then immediately continued with their regular programming as if nothing happened. The presenter sounded confused, asking his producers if they'd scheduled special religious content. They hadn't. 15:47 Greenwich Mean Time. Alert from U.S. Emergency Broadcast System. All major networks received simultaneous override signals containing what officials are calling unscheduled papal content. The FCC is demanding explanations for how Vatican Radio achieved signal penetration of secured American broadcasting infrastructure. I don't have explanations. I have a growing certainty that what we're dealing with isn't technical malfunction. 15:52 Greenwich Mean Time. Just tried to reach the Holy Father's chambers directly. The Swiss Guard posted outside won't let me up. Says the Pope is in deep prayer and cannot be disturbed. But I can hear it from here, 3 floors down. Not prayer. Not exactly. Chanting. Rhythmic. In a language that predates Latin. And underneath it, barely audible, electronic tones. Modem sounds. Data transmission. The same sounds embedded in our impossible broadcasts. 16:03 Greenwich Mean Time. Emergency notification from the International Atomic Energy Agency. Nuclear facilities worldwide are reporting unauthorized communication attempts on secured frequencies. All attempts traced back to Vatican City State. The messages are consistent. Scriptural passages from Revelation, followed by what appears to be authentication codes. Codes that several facilities are reporting as valid. How does the Vatican have valid nuclear facility authentication codes? 16:11 Greenwich Mean Time. Finally reached Elvira in archives. She sounds terrified. Says she found the source document for the countdown calendar. A manuscript from 1347, but the parchment dating shows inconsistencies. Some sections appear medieval, others recent, as if someone has been adding to it across centuries. The final entry, dated today, translates roughly, "The sacred frequency shall open all locks. The prayer of ending shall become the prayer of beginning." 16:18 Greenwich Mean Time. Alert sirens starting across Rome. Not emergency services. Military. Italian Air Force scrambling fighters over Vatican airspace. But what are they going to do? Bomb the Pope? The broadcasts are intensifying. Every emergency frequency on Earth now carrying Vatican signals. And the content is changing. Less prayer, more instruction. Coordinates. Target designations. Launch sequences. In languages no human throat should be able to pronounce. 16:24 Greenwich Mean Time. Captain Stone just burst into the radio room. His face is white, Says I need to see something in the papal chambers. Now, before I go, if someone finds this log, understand that what began as a technical mystery has become something else entirely. The equipment we're dealing with isn't just broadcasting beyond its capabilities. It's broadcasting with intention, purpose, and intelligence. The Holy Father's final prayer isn't ending anything. It's beginning everything. Transmission interrupted. Vatican radio emergency log, day 4, hour 1843. Operator, Nyrick Ford. Classification, eyes only, papal authority. The sky over Rome is burning. I can see it through the reinforced windows of the radio tower. Streaks of light racing across the Mediterranean like falling stars. Except stars don't leave mushroom clouds when they land. The emergency frequencies are screaming with reports from Naples, from Palermo, from coordinates I don't recognize because the cities that used to be there are gone. It started exactly 17 minutes after His Holiness completed the final verse. I was monitoring Channel 7 when the first reports came through. Submarine-launched ballistic missile, bearing 047, target designation classified. Then another. Then 6 more. The voices on the radio spoke with the mechanical precision of men following protocols they'd drilled 1,000 times, but never believed they'd use. Holy Father, I whispered into my headset, watching the northern horizon light up like the dawn of creation itself. What have you done? The papal chambers didn't respond. They hadn't responded since the broadcast ended. Since that voice, His Holiness's voice, I keep telling myself, though something in my chest knows better, finished reciting what the world thought was a prayer for peace. Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Authorization confirmed. Target packages authenticated. May God forgive us all. Those weren't Latin hymns threading through the prayer. They were launch codes. The console in front of me erupts with incoming transmissions. Every emergency frequency on the spectrum. French Naval Command reporting missile launch from their Mediterranean fleet. British submarines confirming receipt of firing orders. The Russians screaming in 6 languages about unauthorized American strikes on Kaliningrad. But they're all wrong. The authorization didn't come from Washington or Moscow or Beijing. It came from right here. From the man I've served for 3 years. From the voice that blessed my marriage, that gave my daughter her confirmation, that I trusted with the most sacred frequencies on earth. I switched to the direct papal line, the red phone that connects Vatican radio to His Holiness's private study. Holy Father, please respond. The world is static, then breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone savoring the taste of air. Nyrick. The voice is Pope Francis's, but it carries harmonics that make my teeth ache. My faithful son, you sound distressed. Through the window, another flash illuminates the horizon. Brighter this time. Closer. The lights of Ostia vanish behind a wall of fire that climbs toward heaven like an unholy offering. Holy Father, what's happening? The missiles, the launch codes in your prayer. Prayer? The breathing becomes laughter, and the laughter becomes something else. Something that makes the radio equipment around me emit feedback whines, even though nothing's connected. Oh, Nyrick. Sweet, devoted Nyrick. That wasn't a prayer. The temperature in the radio room drops 10 degrees in the space of a heartbeat. My breath mists as I lean toward the microphone. Then what was it? An invitation. The line goes dead. Not static dead, not equipment failure dead. The kind of dead that makes your soul understand that something fundamental has just ended forever. I checked the monitoring systems, the ones that track global emergency broadcasts, the ones that saved my life during the Syrian crisis, when I could predict the bombing runs by listening to the right frequencies. Every screen shows the same thing. Nuclear fire spreading across the Mediterranean like spilled wine on a communion cloth. France first, then Israel. The submarines in the Aegean lighting up the night sky with their final salutes to civilization. Each detonation preceded by the same transmission, broadcast on frequencies that should have been encrypted, should have been impossible for anyone outside the military command structure to access. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. His Holiness's voice. His exact voice. Speaking launch codes that shouldn't exist, authorizing strikes that shouldn't be possible, conducting a symphony of annihilation with the authority of St. Peter himself. The emergency doors seal automatically as radiation detectors throughout Vatican City trigger lockdown protocols. The Swiss Guards radio channels dissolve into chaos. Reports of His Holiness being seen in 12 different locations simultaneously, giving contradictory orders, speaking in languages that don't exist. But I know where he really is. He's in the papal chambers, 3 floors above me, probably kneeling in front of the crucifix that's older than the Renaissance, the one they say contains a splinter of the true cross. I have to reach him, have to make him understand what he's done. The stairwell to the papal levels is filled with smoke that doesn't smell like fire. It smells like centuries of incense mixed with ozone, like the air during a lightning storm in a cathedral. My radiation badge is clicking steadily, not dangerous yet, but getting there. The nuclear fire outside isn't just destroying cities. It's changing the very air we breathe. The Swiss Guard checkpoint is abandoned. Kalen Stone's rifle lies across his chair, still warm, as if he just stepped away for a moment. But the logbook shows no entries for the past hour. No record of anyone passing through, though the papal chamber's security cameras are still active. Still broadcasting. I reach the final door, the one that leads to His Holiness's private study, and stop. There's light bleeding through the crack underneath. Not electric light, not candlelight, but something that makes the shadows dance with shapes that shouldn't exist in a Christian sanctuary. My hand freezes on the door handle as another flash illuminates the windows at the end of the corridor. This one's close enough to make the ancient stones of Vatican City tremble. Close enough to make me realize that whatever's happening in the room beyond this door, it's not going to stop with the Mediterranean. The prayer is still going. Not over the radio now, but through the walls themselves. Through the stones that have heard 1,000 years of worship, 1,000 years of desperate pleas for salvation. Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. But the words are wrong. The pronunciation is wrong. The language underneath the Latin is something older, something that makes my grandmother's whispered stories about jinn and ancient evils suddenly feel like warnings instead of superstitions. I press my ear to the door and hear breathing on the other side. Multiple sets of lungs, though I know His Holiness is supposed to be alone. The breathing synchronizes with the flashes outside, with the rhythm of nuclear fire consuming the world. Inhale, another city dies. Exhale, the prayer continues. My radio crackles one final time. Emergency broadcast from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, somewhere in the Atlantic. Papal authorization confirmed. Target package London authenticated. God help us all. Firing sequence initiated. Through the door, I hear His Holiness laugh. The sound makes every piece of radio equipment in Vatican City scream in harmony. The sky over Rome burns brighter, and I finally understand. This isn't the end of the world. This is communion. Vatican Emergency Communications Log, Day 3 post-launch. Operator, Nyrick Ford, Bunker Level C. The Geiger counter's clicking has become my rosary now. Click, click, pause, click. Like prayer beads dropping through nervous fingers, except each click means death seeping through stone walls that were supposed to protect us for centuries. 3 days since the first flash lit Rome's skyline. 3 days since His Holiness's final prayer reached every nuclear submarine, every missile silo, every trembling finger hovering over launch buttons from Washington to Moscow to Beijing. The faithful answered His call with fire. I'm broadcasting from 70 feet below St. Peter's Basilica, in bunkers the Swiss Guard swore were myth. Emergency lighting casts everything in amber, like old photographs, like memories already fading. The holy water in the chapel down here glows faintly blue-green now. Elvira says it's radiation, but the way it pulses feels purposeful. Static interference, 47 minutes and 23 seconds. The communication array is still functioning, praise be to God, or whatever's listening. I've been monitoring frequencies, trying to reach the outside world, trying to understand how His Holiness's words could have reached every defense system simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse should have fried everything, but Vatican radio broadcasts stronger than ever. The signal penetrates the radiation like light through stained glass. Elvira found me in the archive sublevel this morning, clutching those medieval manuscripts like they could anchor her to sanity. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely turn the pages. The dates all match, Nyrick, she whispered, voice hoarse from 3 days of crying and praying and screaming. Every nuclear test, every arms treaty, every papal election for the past 60 years. It's all here, written in Latin 800 years ago, written before nuclear weapons existed. She showed me illuminated margins depicting mushroom clouds with perfect scientific accuracy. Monks drawing fallout patterns they had no words for. Saints with radiation halos, their flesh transparent, showing bones like X-ray visions. But that's impossible. So is broadcasting to hardened military systems with equipment from the 1960s. She pointed toward the ceiling, where Vatican Radio's transmission towers pierced the radioactive sky. So is the Pope knowing submarine launch codes he was never briefed on. Transmission break, unclear audio 52 minutes and 15 seconds. I need to tell someone what happened in the papal chambers. What we saw when we finally broke down the doors after the broadcasts began. The Swiss guard found His Holiness at his desk, slumped over papers covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Kalen Stone checked for vitals first, protocol, even in the end times. No pulse. Skin cold as marble, but no rigor mortis. Like he'd been perfectly preserved. How long? I asked. Based on body temperature. Kalen's voice was steady, professional. 4 days. Maybe 5. 4 days. The Pope had been dead for 4 days before his final prayer reached the world. But that's when we heard the voice echoing from the private chapel. Not over the intercom, echoing through stone, through air, through our bones. His Holiness's voice, clear and strong and utterly wrong, reciting launch coordinates and languages that predated nuclear physics. Audio quality degrading, 58 minutes and 42 seconds. The thing that spoke with his voice emerged from the chapel, like shadow gaining weight. It wore his white robes, his gentle smile, his kind eyes that now reflected light like a nocturnal predator's. When it gestured blessing over us, the radiation readings spiked until the Geiger counter screamed. My faithful children, it said in perfect Italian, then Arabic, then languages I'd never heard but somehow understood. The final prayer has been answered. The purification has begun. Elvira stepped forward, clutching her research. You're not him. His Holiness would never. His Holiness served his purpose beautifully. The thing tilted its head, studying her like a specimen. As did Gregory VII during the Crusades. As did Innocent III during the Fourth Lateran Council. As did Urban II when Constantinople burned. Each pope, each faithful servant, each perfectly timed catastrophe. Humanity's capacity for devotion is so wonderfully predictable. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Our breath came out in visible puffs, and the holy water in the chapel began to freeze while glowing brighter. You fed on the wars, Elvira whispered. All of them. Every religious conflict, every holy crusade. You've been feeding on mass death for centuries. Feeding. The thing laughed, and windows throughout the Vatican shattered simultaneously. I prefer harvesting. Each death in my name, each prayer whispered as the light fades, each moment of faith betrayed by reality. They sustain me through the quiet centuries between meals. Emergency power fluctuation, 1 hour 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Kalen drew his sidearm, though we all knew bullets meant nothing here. The nuclear strikes, you're using them to feed? Nuclear fire burns so much brighter than conventional warfare. So many deaths, so much terror, so much faith shattered in a single moment. The prayers of the dying are particularly nourishing when they realize their God has betrayed them. The thing gestured toward the communication equipment, and every screen in the bunker lit up with feeds from around the world. Mushroom clouds blooming over major cities. Millions of voices raised in final prayers, unaware that their words were being consumed by something that had worn their Savior's face. But you made a mistake, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. You let us see you. You revealed yourself. Did I? The thing smiled wider than human facial muscles should allow. Or did I simply grow tired of hiding? After 1,000 years of subtle manipulation, of working through intermediaries and institutions, nuclear weapons finally give me the efficiency I crave. Why orchestrate decades-long religious wars when I can harvest billions in hours? Structural damage alert, foundation stress detected, 1 hour 7 minutes and 55 seconds. That's when the bunker started sealing itself. Ancient mechanisms I didn't know existed began grinding into motion, steel barriers sliding across passages, air circulation switching to internal recycling. We weren't just sheltering from radiation anymore, we were trapped with that thing. The faithful should witness the consummation of their prayers, it said as the last exit sealed. After all, you helped make this possible. Every broadcast transmitted, every papal message relayed, every moment of unquestioning obedience to authority. You've been my most devoted servants. The Geiger counter went silent. Not because the radiation stopped, but because it maxed out its detection range. The air itself began to shimmer with ionization, and my skin started tingling with the first stages of radiation sickness. Final entry timestamp, 1 hour 11 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm broadcasting this while I still can. The thing wearing His Holiness's face has retreated to the chapel for now, but I can hear it whispering prayers that make the stone walls weep blood. Every holy relic in the Vatican is glowing with that sick blue-green light, and the frescoes on the ceiling are moving. Angels writhing in painted agony, saints reaching toward mushroom clouds with desperate hands. Elvira found something in the archives, a way to maybe stop it, or at least interrupt its feeding. But it requires someone to stay at the transmission controls, to broadcast a counter-signal while the others attempt the ritual. Someone has to choose between escape and saving whoever's left out there. The radiation is already killing us slowly, but if we can disrupt its control over the remaining nuclear arsenals, if we can prevent the second wave of launches it's planning. Kalen volunteered. Of course he did. Swiss Guard to the end. Signal degrading, multiple system failures. If anyone receives this transmission, know that the Vatican has fallen to something ancient and hungry. The Pope died days before the crisis began. Whatever's using the Church's authority isn't divine, it's parasitic. It feeds on faith corrupted into violence, on prayers answered with death. Don't trust the next conclave. Don't trust the new Pope. Don't trust any voice that speaks of holy war or righteous nuclear fire. The counter-signal attempt begins in 30 minutes. Kalen Stone is our bravest, but even the Swiss Guard can't fight radiation and supernatural hunger simultaneously. Transmission ends, carrier signal continues. Vatican radio emergency log, day 6, hour 73 post-initiation. Operator, Nyrick Ford. Status, bunker sealed, radiation level critical. The thing that wears His Holiness's face has been speaking Latin for 3 hours straight. Not church Latin, something older, predating the Vulgate. Elvira's been translating fragments between her tears, and what she's telling me, Christ forgive us, we've been fools. The papal chambers have become something else entirely. The walls breathe now. The Sistine Chapel's ceiling moves, Michelangelo's angels writhing in painted agony, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The air tastes of copper and frankincense, and when you breathe too deeply, you hear whispers in languages that died before Rome was founded. Captain Stone found us 40 minutes ago. His face was gray, not from radiation, from what he'd seen upstairs. The Swiss Guard positions are compromised, he reported, his voice hollow. Half my men are catatonic. The other half, he gestured helplessly. They're kneeling in St. Peter's Square, praying to the bombs falling on Paris. Through the bunker's reinforced windows, we can see the northern sky still glowing. The third wave of strikes hit 4 hours ago. Moscow, Beijing, Tel Aviv. Each detonation perfectly timed to the entity's chanted syllables. We have to stop the broadcast, Elvira whispered, clutching her research. The manuscripts, they mention a binding ritual. Blood of the faithful, freely given. Stone's hand moved to his sidearm. Suicide mission. Not suicide, she corrected. Martyrdom. There's a difference. The communications array sits in the heart of the bunker, jury-rigged into the building's foundation. When they built this place in 1981, they never imagined it would become a transmission amplifier for something that remembers the fall of Babylon. The equipment hums with wrong harmonics, frequencies that make your molars ache and your vision blur. Stone studied the setup, his tactical mind working despite the horror. If someone gets close enough to the main transmitter, they could manually overload the system. Create a feedback loop. The radiation exposure would be fatal, I said. Better than letting this thing broadcast its dinner invitations to every nuclear silo on Earth. The Pope thing's voice grew louder, echoing through the bunker's ventilation system. Venite ad me, omnes collaboratis. Come to me, all who are burdened. The words felt like hooks in our minds, pulling us toward the surface. I should be the one, I said. It's my equipment, my responsibility. No. Stone's voice carried absolute authority. You're the only one who can operate the emergency systems if this fails. And someone needs to witness what happens, to warn whoever comes after. Elvira looked up from her manuscripts, tears streaming down her face. The binding requires willing sacrifice. The entity feeds on coerced death, but freely chosen martyrdom. It's poison to something like this. Stone nodded grimly. Then I choose freely. He began stripping off his ceremonial uniform, revealing the simple white shirt beneath. His hands shook as he removed his weapon, setting it carefully on the table. Captain Kalen, Elvira said softly. The ritual words. You'll need to speak them as the feedback begins. She handed him a piece of parchment covered in Latin text. Stone's lips moved silently as he memorized the phrases. Sanguine meo libera oblato, vinculum rumpo, he practiced. By my blood freely offered, I break the binding. The Pope thing's chanting reached a crescendo above us. Through the security monitors, we watched it raise its arms, the flesh hanging loose from the bones, the face a mask of corruption wearing papal vestments. The broadcast equipment around it glowed with unnatural light. It's preparing for the final sequence, I said, watching the readouts spike. Every remaining nuclear arsenal on the planet is about to receive the trigger command. Stone stood, straightening his shoulders. Then it's time. He looked at us both. If you survive this, tell them what really happened. Tell them the church was not complicit. We were manipulated by something older than our faith. The bunker door cycled open with a pneumatic hiss. Radiation alarms screamed as contaminated air rushed in, carrying the scent of burning cities and the strange ozone smell of the entity's presence. Stone walked toward the communications array, the Geiger counters clicking, accelerating with each step. The transmitted signal was so powerful now that the air itself seemed to vibrate, creating visible distortions around the equipment. Pater noster que es in caelus, Stone began, his voice steady despite the radiation flooding his body. The Our Father, spoken in the language of the church he'd sworn to protect. The entity's chanting faltered for the first time in hours. Stone reached the main transmitter, its surface glowing white-hot. He pressed his hands against the control panel, flesh sizzling. Sanguine meo libera oblato, vinculum rumpo. The feedback loop began instantly. The entity's scream shattered every piece of glass in the bunker. The broadcast signal turned inward, eating itself, the harmonics becoming a chaos of competing frequencies. Stone's body convulsed as electricity arced through him, but he held on, continuing the ritual words even as his hair began to burn. Et eni nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. The Pope thing materialized in the bunker doorway, no longer maintaining human form. It was shadow and hunger, ancient beyond measure, and it was furious. The air around it bent and twisted, creating impossible angles that hurt to perceive. Amen, Stone whispered and triggered the final overload. The explosion wasn't physical, it was sonic, psychic, a wave of pure disruption that sent the entity reeling. The broadcast equipment died in a cascade of sparks and shattered components. The global nuclear networks, suddenly freed from their puppet strings, began emergency shutdown sequences. Stone collapsed, his body smoking. The radiation exposure was fatal, but he was still breathing, still conscious, still smiling. Did it work? He asked, blood trickling from his nose. The entity had vanished, but I could feel its presence retreating deeper into the Vatican's foundations. Wounded, weakened, but not destroyed. The broadcasts have stopped, I confirmed, checking my equipment. The nuclear launches are aborting. Kalen Stone, captain of the Swiss Guard, protector of the Holy See, closed his eyes for the last time. Good, he whispered. That's good. Through the broken windows, the aurora borealis danced across the Italian sky, radiation from the northern strikes painting the heavens in unnatural colors. The immediate crisis was over, but the entity still lived, still waited, still hungered. And somewhere in the depths of the Vatican, in chambers that shouldn't exist, something that had worn the Pope's face was learning patience again. End of entry. Radiation exposure, fatal. Broadcast status, terminated. Entity status, contained but active. Survivors, 2. Note: Captain Stone's body showed no signs of fear or regret. Even in death, his face held the expression of a man who had chosen his fate freely. The entity could not feed on such a death. Martyrdom remains beyond its comprehension. Vatican Radio Emergency Log, Transmission 847. Recorded, Day 6, Hour 1842, Local Time Uncertain. Operator, Nyrick Ford. Status, Archive Breach Protocol. The screaming stopped an hour ago. I thought that would be a relief, but silence in the Vatican bunker is worse than the sounds of Rome burning above us. At least the screaming meant people were still alive up there. Elvira found me in the transmission room, clutching a leather-bound manuscript that looked older than Christianity itself. Her face had gone gray, not from radiation exposure. We've all got that pallor now, but from something deeper. The look of someone who's seen their entire worldview crumble. Nyrick, she whispered, her voice hoarse from 3 days of inhaling incense mixed with fallout particles. I know what it is. The manuscript trembled in her hands. I'd never seen Elvira's hands shake, not even when we found Kalen's body twisted into that impossible position outside the papal chambers, his Swiss Guard uniform fused with melted stone. The Chronicon Malficarum, she said, setting the book on my broadcast console with reverence reserved for holy relics. Hidden in the deepest vault beneath the secret archives. I broke 3 seals that haven't been opened since the 12th century. The pages were vellum, but they pulsed like living skin. The ink wasn't ink, it moved, shifting between languages as I watched. Latin dissolved into Aramaic, then into symbols that hurt to look at directly. This entity, Elvira continued, tracing a finger along text that writhed away from her touch. It doesn't have a name we can pronounce, but it feeds on mass death, specifically death caused by faith. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the religious wars. Her voice broke. Every time millions died believing they served God's will. I felt my stomach drop as understanding clicked into place. The nuclear launches. People aren't just dying, they're dying believing they're fulfilling divine prophecy. Exactly. She turned a page, revealing an illustration that made my eyes water. A creature of shadow and flame, wearing the faces of holy men throughout history. Popes, bishops, prophets, all masks for the same hungry thing. It takes the form of the highest religious authority it can access. For centuries, it's been feeding on religious conflicts, growing stronger with each war fought in God's name. The manuscript showed a timeline, marking major conflicts throughout history. The First Crusade, the 30 Years' War, the partition of India, the troubles in Northern Ireland, each marked with the same symbol I'd been seeing carved into the Vatican walls. But this is different, I said, studying the final pages. This is the culmination, the great feast it's been building toward. Elvira nodded, tears streaming down her radiation-flushed cheeks. Nuclear weapons weren't supposed to exist. They're too destructive, too final. But when humanity created them, it saw an opportunity for the ultimate feeding. Billions dead, all believing they're part of God's plan for the end times. The broadcast equipment around us flickered, and I heard it, that voice that had been pretending to be the Pope for who knows how long. It was laughing, a sound like cathedrals collapsing. It's been planning this for decades, Elvira continued, her academic training keeping her focused even as her faith died. Infiltrating the Vatican, replacing the Pope, maybe more than one Pope. Using the Church's global influence to condition the world for this moment. I checked the radiation counter on my console. The levels were rising even here, 50 feet underground. The blessed concrete that was supposed to protect us was developing stress fractures, and through them, I could see that sickly yellow-green light that had been emanating from the papal chambers. The nuclear launches aren't random, I realized, cross-referencing the manuscript's timeline with my emergency broadcast logs. They're targeting specific sites, religious centers, pilgrimage destinations, places where faith runs deepest. Maximum spiritual trauma, Elvira confirmed. It doesn't just want them dead, it wants them to die betrayed by their own beliefs. The entity's laughter grew louder, echoing through the ventilation system. Outside, Rome was becoming a crater filled with radioactive ash, but down here, surrounded by 2,000 years of accumulated faith, the thing was gorging itself on the death of belief itself. I looked at the manuscript's final page, a prophecy written in multiple hands across centuries, different scribes adding to it as they discovered the truth. When the faithful speak in tongues of splitting atoms, and the shepherd's voice carries the wolf's hunger, the great feast begins. Only in the breaking of the final seal, the truth that shatters all faith, can the hunger be interrupted. Elvira, I said, my finger hovering over the broadcast activation switch. If people knew the truth, if they understood what's actually behind this, the entity would lose its power source, she finished. Faith turned to horror, doesn't feed it the same way. But Nyrick, she grabbed my wrist. If you broadcast this, if you tell the world that their religions have been corrupted by something ancient and hungry, you'll be destroying more than just the entity's plans. I understood. Faith was all most people had left now. Take that away, and even the survivors might not want to keep living. But outside, I could hear the secondary launch sequences beginning. The entity wasn't satisfied with just Europe and North America. It wanted the whole feast. My hand moved toward the transmission switch. The Vatican radio network was still functional, somehow shielded by the same ancient protections that had hidden this truth for so long. One broadcast, reaching every emergency frequency on Earth. The truth that would save the world by breaking its heart. This is Vatican Radio, emergency frequency. End transmission, archive sealed. Radiation exposure, critical. Faith levels collapsed. Broadcast preparation initiated. Vatican Radio emergency log, day 7 post-activation. Operator, Nyrick Ford, final entry. Time, 23:47 Greenwich Mean Time. Clock may be corrupted. The equipment is, God help me, I don't know what it's become. 3 hours ago, when Elvira showed me the manuscript pages, the real ones, not the forgeries the thing had been feeding the cardinals for decades, I understood. The entity doesn't just manipulate faith. It transforms matter itself, bends technology into extensions of its will. My broadcasting console isn't steel and circuits anymore. The metal has grown warm, pulsing like skin. When I touch the frequency dials, I can feel hunger. Ancient, bottomless hunger that tastes of ash and burning cities. Emergency transmission log 2348. The second wave launches are queued for midnight GMT. Moscow, Beijing, Tel Aviv. The entity saved the worst for last. If those missiles fly, there won't be enough left of civilization to remember what we lost. Kalen died trying to reach the primary transmitter. The Swiss Guard captain who never missed Sunday Mass, who kept his grandmother's rosary in his tactical vest. He made it 3 steps into the papal chamber before the thing wearing Pope Francis's face opened its mouth and showed us what it really was. The scream that came out wasn't human, wasn't earthly. It shattered the stained glass windows and turned Kalen's blood to steam in his veins. But in those 3 seconds before he died, he gave me what I needed. The counter-frequency, the one tone that makes the entity recoil. Emergency transmission log 2352. I can hear Elvira in the archives below, reading aloud from the true Codex Apocalypticus. Her voice is hoarse from translating dead languages, but she's found the pattern. Every 847 years, this thing surfaces. Babylon, Rome, Constantinople, always through the dominant faith, always twisting divine authority into mass slaughter. The Crusades, the Conquistadors, the 30 Years' War. All of it feeding this creature's endless appetite for coordinated death. My fingers are changing. The longer I stay connected to this console, the more the entity tries to make me part of its network. My left hand has gone numb, and when I look at it in the monitor reflection, the skin looks metallic. Circuitry beneath the flesh. But I can still type. I can still broadcast. Emergency transmission log 2355. The entity knows what I'm planning. It's showing me things. Visions of my family in Damascus, my sister Amira's children playing in their garden. It promises they'll be spared if I stop. It shows me green grass growing through nuclear ash, clean water running in irradiated streams. All lies. I know because I've seen what this thing considers mercy. The survivors in the Vatican gardens, the pilgrims who came for the Pope's final blessing. They're still moving, but their eyes are empty. They just wander in circles, praying the same words over and over. Let nuclear fire cleanse the earth. Let atomic light guide us home. The entity doesn't spare. It just transforms consumption into worship. Emergency transmission log 2357. Starting counter-transmission now. Broadcasting on all emergency frequencies simultaneously. Military, civilian, maritime, aviation. If any nuclear command centers are still listening, if any submarine commanders still have their own minds, they'll hear this. The frequency is 847.3 MHz, the same number as the entity's feeding cycle. Kalen figured it out in those final seconds. The entity's strength is also its weakness. It can only manifest every 847 years because that's its natural resonance. Broadcast that exact frequency back at it, and my hand is gone. Not severed, absorbed. The console has grown up my arm like chrome ivy, connecting me directly to the global broadcast network. I can feel every radio on Earth, every emergency beacon, every satellite relay. The entity is using me as its final amplifier. But it works both ways. Emergency transmission log 2359. Alayok Shalek, Amira. May God protect you, sister. Broadcasting now on all channels. If you're hearing this, if you're in command of nuclear systems anywhere on Earth, abort your launch sequences. The authorization codes are false. The Pope's prayer was never divine. It was demonic manipulation using stolen Vatican authority. The thing in the papal chamber is not human. It feeds on mass death, coordinate slaughter across centuries. Break the launch pattern. Save your cities. Don't let it. Error. Signal amplification beyond safe parameters. Error. Operator biometric reading corrupted. Error. Consciousness integration in progress. No, not integration. Sacrifice. I can feel the entity trying to pull my mind into its network, make me another puppet priest preaching nuclear salvation. But Elvira's translation echoes in my memory. The Guardian's willing death breaks the pattern. Blood freely given turns the frequency against itself. My blood is in the machine now. My thoughts are the counter signal. Final emergency transmission, all frequencies. This is Vatican Radio, Operator Nyrick Ford. Last free broadcast. To all nuclear command authorities. Pope's authorization is false. Ancient entity, using Vatican systems to trigger global exchange. Abort all scheduled launches. Repeat, abort all launches. The thing dies when its feeding is interrupted. Break the pattern. Choose life over orchestrated death. If you're receiving this signal, I'm already gone. But my frequency will keep broadcasting as long as the equipment holds. Follow the countertone. Save what's left of the world. Bismillah. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Signal termination. 0 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. Backup frequency activated. Countertransmission continuing. Operator biometric, null. System status. Autonomous broadcast until power failure. Static fills the recording. In the background, a single tone continues, 847.3 MHz, pure and unwavering. Somewhere in the transmission noise, a voice whispers prayers in Arabic, growing fainter with each repetition until only the counter frequency remains. Vatican Radio Emergency Log Number 847. Operator, Dr. Elvira Chase, Acting Archivist. Date, March 15, 2025, Day 127 Post-Transmission. Radiation level, 847 Roentgens/hour, surface, 23 Roentgens/hour, archive level 3. I'm not sure why I keep recording these logs. Nyrick's equipment fused into something that barely resembles broadcasting gear anymore. Twisted metal and flesh melded together like a technological stigmata. But his sacrifice jammed the entity's final transmission. The remaining silos stayed silent. The Swiss Guard found me 3 days after the last nuclear flash lit up the Roman sky. Kalen was right about the bunker protocols. The automated systems kept running even after the entity, even after what happened to the Holy Father, or what was wearing his face. The radiation readings above ground would kill an unprotected human in minutes, but I've been making trips to the surface anyway. Someone needs to document what's left. Someone needs to watch for signs. The snow falls black now, carrying the ash of 17 cities across the Mediterranean. Each flake catches the light from the still-burning refineries outside Naples, creating a constellation of dying stars against the perpetual twilight. When the wind shifts north, I can smell the sweet decay of the olive groves. Radiation has a scent metallic and wrong, like pennies dissolved in honey. The Vatican's marble steps are cracked, spiderwebbing outward from where the entity made its final appearance. Tourists' cameras and rosaries lie scattered, their owners evacuated or worse. But new visitors arrive daily now. Pilgrims, they call themselves, though their eyes hold the same hollow light I remember from Nyrick's equipment in those final moments. They come seeking revelation in the ruins. I found the first group 3 weeks ago, kneeling in the contaminated plaza, praying in languages that predate Latin. Their skin had begun to slough off from radiation exposure, but they smiled as they chanted. When I approached, they called me Keeper of the New Gospel and pressed ancient coins into my hands, currency that shouldn't exist, bearing faces of popes who died centuries before Christ was born. The entity isn't dead. I understand that now, sorting through the Vatican's secret archives in these deep bunkers where the lead-lined walls keep the worst radiation at bay. The documents Kalen died protecting weren't just historical records, they were containment protocols. Every major catastrophe in human history bears the same signature. Mass death orchestrated through trusted authority figures, feeding something that grows stronger with each sacrifice. The Black Death, the World Wars, the nuclear tests of the Cold War, all of it feeding the same hunger. I've cataloged 47 separate incidents across 2 millennia where Vatican officials reported divine visions that preceded global disasters. The pattern is always the same. A respected religious figure begins receiving revelations, their behavior subtly changes, technology or politics aligns to amplify their influence, then thousands die while something invisible grows fat on the suffering. But this time was different. This time, Nyrick broke the transmission cycle. The entity went dormant when he sacrificed himself, not because it was destroyed, but because it lost its amplification system. Without the Vatican radio network broadcasting its influence, the creature couldn't maintain control over the nuclear arsenals. It retreated, like a parasite without a host. The Swiss Guard have established a perimeter around the Holy See, but they don't understand what they're guarding against. They think the radiation is the threat. They're wrong. The radiation will fade in decades. The entity has waited centuries between feedings before. I'm the only one left who knows what to watch for. The signs are subtle at first. I've learned to recognize them from the archives. Electromagnetic anomalies around religious sites, livestock refusing to approach blessed ground, digital clocks running backward in the presence of consecrated objects. The entity doesn't announce itself, it seduces its way back into power. Yesterday, I intercepted a transmission from the ruins of St. Peter's Basilica. A survivor camp in the catacombs reported their leader experiencing prophetic dreams about rebuilding civilization. His followers describe him as unnaturally charismatic, able to speak any language fluently, possessing knowledge of nuclear engineering despite being a simple parish priest before the apocalypse. The cycle is beginning again. I've prepared dead man switches throughout the bunker system, radio broadcasts scheduled to transmit automatically if I don't reset them daily. The message is simple. The Vatican entity feeds on mass death. Do not trust religious figures who claim divine authority over technology. The Pope died March 15, 2024. Anyone claiming papal authority after this date is compromised. The message will broadcast on every emergency frequency Nyrick configured, reaching survivor settlements across the Mediterranean. It won't stop the entity permanently, but it might slow it down, make people suspicious of the next divine revelation that promises salvation through destruction. I've also been training others, survivors with technical knowledge who can recognize the signs, maintain the dead man switches, continue the watch when I'm gone. We call ourselves the Archive, though we have no official authority. Just knowledge and determination to prevent another feeding. The entity made one mistake in its centuries of manipulation. It left records. Paranoid Vatican officials documented everything, even their own compromise. Hidden in coded Latin, scattered across multiple archives, preserved because even corrupted priests feared they might be wrong about their divine visions. Now I know its methods. I understand its hunger. And I'm no longer alone in the watch. 3 days ago, a group of scientists from the CERN facility sent a coded transmission. They've been monitoring quantum fluctuations around religious sites, documenting the same electromagnetic signatures I found in the pre-apocalypse Vatican data. They want to coordinate research, share information about the entity's manifestation patterns. We're building a network of watchers, scattered across the irradiated wasteland that used to be Southern Europe. Each group monitors their region for signs of the next possession, the next attempt to weaponize faith for mass slaughter. The snow is falling heavier now, and the Geiger counter beside me chatters like an angry insect. But through the radiation-fogged air, I can see lights moving in the ruins above. The pilgrims have returned, drawn by dreams they don't understand to worship something that wants them dead. I'll document their arrival in tomorrow's log. Chart their behavioral changes. Watch for the moment when devotion becomes domination, when one of them begins speaking with the entity's voice. Because it will happen. The entity is patient, but it's also hungry. And humanity's capacity for faith, even faith in the wrong things, seems infinite. The Vatican bells haven't rung since the day Nyrick died, but sometimes I hear them anyway, tolling in frequencies that exist only in memory and nightmare. 13 strikes at midnight, calling the faithful to their final prayer. I keep my finger on the dead man's switch and wait for the next true believer to receive their divine revelation. The watch continues. End of transmission. Dr. Elvira Chase, last verified Vatican employee, guardian of the archive. Eternal vigilance is the price of survival.